We have here a McIntosh 240, a venerable old tube hi-fi amp. In the live chat, I got as far as taking the cage off the tubes. That's as far as I went, and verified that none of the tubes here have lost vacuum. I thought I'd pick up here. I was going to try to do this while doing the live stream, and I quickly realized that I'd have to move the camera around too much for you guys to see anything, and I'm not set up to do that with any mechanized armatures or anything. And it's also really hard for me to do detailed work and respond to questions in any kind of focused sense. And I don't want either the quality of my responses or the quality of my work to suffer. So that just turned into Q&A. Got a lot of good questions asked. I did not get a chance to answer all of them. I do apologize. Sometimes they would come faster than I could keep up with, or I'd be answering one that required a little more in-depth response, and then I'd miss one scrolling by. I'll do another Q&A pretty soon, and maybe you can get your question in then. There was one that I did want to address because it's kind of cool. Someone was asking about Marshalls in Memphis, and I had said that they didn't really start to be very common here until after the U.S. distribution changed. By that time, they were pretty much into the metal panel era. And someone had seen, they said they saw a picture of Steve Cropper, with Booker T and the MGs playing through Marshalls. And indeed they did. That footage of the whole band done up with really sharp suits, playing with Marshall stacks behind them, that was from the UK tour in '67. That would have been backline they were provided with, but they really did sound cool on that appearance with Otis. If you listen, I mean, Sam and Dave is there too, are there too, and some others, but especially the Otis stuff. That's a great live performance. Look for that. They look sharp. They sound fantastic. And yeah, in that concert they were using Marshalls, but the stuff on the record, Cropper was mostly using a little Harvard. So a microphone can make a small amp sound very big. Let's get into this McIntosh. I'm going to flip it over, take the bottom cover off, and then we'll get back into it. Well, this is quite a surprise. The ticket doesn't give any problem description, it just says McIntosh. The chassis over here is very clean. The chassis in this area, and all over this area, and all over these tube sockets, has this nasty white substance. Let's see how well that cleans up with a little bit of alcohol. So that shouldn't be any real problem to get out of here. And I don't have a crystal ball, but I don't think one's necessary. There's a big multi-section can cap here. There's one here and another here. There used to be one right here. And there are wire connections where the connections used to be made to that, and resistors. And judging by all this white residue, it's very likely that whatever can cap was here exploded, causing the residue, and someone removed it and then stopped. So it was removed and no other work has been done. So I need to call up the schematic for this amp and see what the filter caps should be, and then call the owner and give him an estimate. And that's going to include the big multi-section can caps and any other electrolytics. Let's take a look around and see what's waiting for us. Up here on this board, it's just the preamp tubes and resistors. And there's a fine coating of white dust on everything, but that should all clean up just fine. What doesn't just brush out, I'll give an alcohol bath, and that'll all be a non-issue. The trouble with working on these, it's not trouble, but it does make labor take longer than it would on guitar amps from the same period, is that the leads of all the capacitors on the other side go through the eyelets, the holes in the tag boards rather, and then wrap around multiple times. And so if I need to change this cap, I've got to undo all this and fish it out. I think this is actually a film cap. It's probably fine. There's some electrolytics over here, though. Let's turn our attention to that area. It's just the two electrolytics here. These are electrolytics. The others are all film caps. Vintage Black Beauties, made of unifordium. So hopefully none of them need to get replaced. If they do need to get replaced, there are various high-quality capacitors on the market, which will sound absolutely fine in here. Given the hi-fi nature of things and the intrinsic value of this, if after I get all the electrolytics changed out and the power supply is good again, we have any leakage from any of these film caps, I'll probably go with the Solens, which are expensive, but they are certainly a good choice for use in a McIntosh. You can see how nasty that residue is. And I'm pretty confident that this was an exploded capacitor that caused that. Let's look at a few other things real quick. Well, there's a thumbnail for you if ever I've seen one. You can see the nice leakage out of that electrolytic cap. And I've never seen diodes mounted in little clamps like that before. I guess it works. I'm just a little put off by that metal there, so close to that metal. It depends on what that terminal strip is attached to. If it's not connected to anything else, it could be fine, but a little bit skeezy to look at. Once this cap's out, I'll measure these diodes, make sure that they're good. They're pretty, and there's probably no problem. There's not a lot of current through the diodes in a setup like this. And I'll make sure the fuses are good. One other thing really caught my eye, though. Right here, I don't know if this is an MOV or a thermistor or something from earlier periods of audio with which I'm unfamiliar. I'll find out, I'll educate myself. But this used to be attached, and as it came in, it was like this. So whatever it is, it blew out. And it might have been due to a big short in this cap, as this cap was dying, causing that. I'll find out what part this is. It'll be on the schematic, and I'll replace it. And these amps are typically just a two-prong ungrounded power cable, and there's not a lot of room in the chassis for a better cable. I think I can squeeze in a 3-conductor grounded cable with one of my little Heiko things. If not, I may mount it on a different point of the chassis. I'll talk to the owner about that. A lot of hi-fi stuff, especially from the period, was ungrounded, so you wouldn't have ground loops when you connected a bunch of stuff together. But this thing is a high voltage tube amp, the same as a Fender twin reverb, pretty much, as far as danger to the owner goes. So it would be very good to have this grounded. One other option is, instead of using a grounded power cable, which would be almost intrusive to install here because of the hole size, would just be to run a wire with a little C-clamp connector, spade lug connector, from one of the ground connections on the common output on the speaker to the grounding screw of the power receptacle this is powered from. I can tell the owner how to do that. It'd be inexpensive, would ground the chassis safely, and would be a non-intrusive way of making this thing a lot safer. The trouble with that from the owner's perspective is, yes, it makes you safer, but then when you interconnect your gear, you can have ground loops develop, at which point you may want to have some telescoped connections. Sometimes you can get away with it. It's going to depend on whatever receiver or turntables he's using with this. I will discuss with the owner. This amp came in without a fuse, without a cap for the fuse holder. It says 3.2 amp here. I don't happen to have that. I will test it with a 3 amp fuse. And if I need to order a 3.2, that's fine. If we need to go to a 4 amp to adjust for modern wall voltages, that's not unheard of for tube gear from this era. But in my initial testing, at least, a 3 amp will be fine. If this thing is running healthily and there's no problem with it, it will not blow a 3 amp fuse unless I were to run it for sustained periods at extremely high output. And even then, it would probably be fine with a 3-amp fuse. But I'm putting one in, and in my bowl of random stuff, how did this get here? I don't know. I'll just put it in this bowl. I happen to have a Bakelite fuse cap sitting around. It's been sitting there for, about a year at least. I don't know where it came from. It might have come from an old 60s Fender where the original fuse holder was missing or shattered or replaced. Anyway, it's a perfect fit and looks the part, looks great, period connect Bakelite. So I think the owner will be happy with that. I've got a lot of cleanup to do in this area. I'm not sure if I'm going to try to touch any of the corrosion here because I don't know how even the right solvent like a WD-40 might react with the silkscreen. I might find an unobtrusive part of the chassis to do a little test spot, but I don't want to remove any lettering in the sake of trying to make it look newer. Now you can see here, this is what it all used to look like with the shiny silver and the very crisp lettering. And it is not held up well here where finger oils get on it, people touch it. I expect, given that white residue that's floating around inside the chassis, all in this area, that all these spots will be very dirty, but they should clean up. Some dust flew out as I flipped that switch. That'll all get cleaned. All the contacts will get cleaned. All the terminals for the speakers will get cleaned. So we know we need to do a pretty extensive cleaning and recap. This thing's got 11 tubes, 7 of which are preamp tubes, assuming the one is just missing as opposed to not used in this model. I've got to look it up. I would not be surprised if one or more of the preamp tubes were bad. Hopefully the output tubes are all still good. They are the original old made for McIntosh by General Electric 6L6 GCs. If they are not, there are some good 6L6 GC SDRs on the market which would be appropriate for this amp. I did a little snooping around off camera, and the tube pins themselves look pretty good, but there is that corrosion both in the sockets and on some of the pins from those caps exploding. So these will all get cleaned out. Hopefully they'll all come back to life. And once everything's clean, everything will be good. So there's going to be a certain amount of heavy lifting involved for this amp, but nothing too onerous, nothing that's imposterous. And hopefully we'll get to hear this thing make beautiful music again someday in the near future.